Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to My Favorite Mistake. My guest today is Sabrina Stocker. She is a tennis player turned entrepreneur. She's an international speaker. She was a finalist on The Apprentice, the UK version, I would point out, as an American, that was on BBC One. She's founded multiple businesses. She is a publicist. She's most recently the founder of 2 PR, public relations firm. And Sabrina wants to inspire and help others to become the best versions of themselves, and specifically through helping people start and scale their businesses. So her website is 2pr.io, and I'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes. So Sabrina, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to join you. I'm really excited to hopefully share some funny and fun stories with your listeners as well.
Well, yeah, and I'm excited to hear your story. There's a lot of things that you've done. I've got some questions, a lot we can talk about. And, before we jump into all of that, I think, we will jump right into the question of I was going to mention my mistake and say I don't edit these things out. I knew as I was starting there, I'm like, well, I know we tried to get right into the question at hand, but I was going to mention that Sabrina had me as a guest on her podcast, a YouTube show called Be the Authority. Is that the right description? A podcast?
Yeah, it's a YouTube show. We're turning it into a podcast, and Mark, I'm sure you'll make the cut.
And that first conversation was a lot of fun, and now we get to turn the tables. This happens sometimes, so
amazing.
Remember, put a Post-it note here that says, "Remember, you're hosting this time." For Sabrina to ask a question. Okay, so I will ask that question now. Of all the different things, you've done a lot of things. Yeah, I was going to point out too, awkwardly or as a mistake, you may be my youngest guest.
Oh, cool.
I don't do an age check on everybody, but you have done a lot of things at a relatively young age. And so let me just frame the question. Even younger professionals, you've done a lot of things. So what would you say is your favorite mistake?
I love this question. So I'm currently 26, turning 27, and I had to think about that. And my mistake actually comes with age. So my first business was when I was 14 years old. And it was a typical business. So I was buying and selling sweets. And we actually got it into some supermarkets, which was really cool. And when I was 21 years old, I was earning pretty good money at that age. And I was a tennis coach while I was studying my MBA. And I was earning around £40 an hour, which at that time was around $60. Now maybe a little bit closer to 40, compared to a lot of my friends that were on minimum wage. And I was doing pretty well. I was earning at that time more than what my other families were earning, and I could pretty much buy anything I wanted. And at that age, I was really stable. I was like, this is great. I've got a good income. I've got my MBA going. What else can I do? And I really saw this opportunity in the tennis market. And that was bringing kids-friendly tournaments to different health clubs. And if I looked at a lot of the competitors, they were maybe a little bit older, stuck in their ways, didn't have the best experience. So I thought, why not? So we started running these events. And within around 3 months, we became, fully booked. Yeah. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. And at that side, I just heard so much feedback of, how's that small little company going of yours? Why would you change to, do something else when you're earning good money? Why are you trying to do something different compared to what's already been done before? And a lot of this time, it was people I looked up to. It was my boss, my colleagues, some of my friends. They were saying, why are you working so hard? You're too young to do this. And I got this belief in my head that I'm too young to do this, and I didn't take action. And because I didn't take action, I decided to go travel, as most 21-year-olds do. I traveled for 3 months, and I came back and I found out one of the mums from the tennis tournaments started the exact same format of what I was doing 5 miles down the road. And I was fuming. I was like, how has this happened? And it was that fuel and that mistake of listening to other people telling me that I was too young that actually got me fired up in the first place. And a lot of time when we talk about motivation of what drives us as entrepreneurs, my motivation sometimes can be anger, meaning if I'm frustrated at the sake of not expanding fast enough and someone else taking my ideas. In PR, I was frustrated about someone else taking my money and not getting me results. That then drives me to do something differently. And within 6 months, we were running the largest tenants company in the UK. And within 2 years, we had over 40 members of staff, 400 events, a multiple six-figure profit company at the age of 22. And that was all fueled by fire. So that's really where my biggest mistake came in and why I love it.
Wow. So, I mean, there's a lot to dig into there. For one, now I'm feeling sensitive. If people are saying you couldn't or shouldn't do things because of age. I mentioned your age, I think as a compliment that you've done a lot of.
I take it as a compliment.
Okay. Didn't want that to mistakenly come across as, because I think back to earlier stages of my career, people watching on YouTube and see, okay, I clearly have gray hair now, but there were times in my career, I was the youngest person on the team and I would be self-conscious about that. Now there's, a software company I'm involved in where I am the old guy, the gray hair, but yeah, thinking back to where you were in those early days and, how much are you proving to yourself that you can do these things? You talk about the extrinsic motivation. It seemed like you had a high level of drive to begin with to start these businesses, right? I mean, where did this come from, even going back to being 14 and starting a business?
Yeah, well, I didn't really have any business mentors apart from The Apprentice, which is why I was so determined to go on The Apprentice when I was older. And I was the youngest ever on The Apprentice as well at my age then. And for me, I actually started listening to Brendan Burchard and Tony Robbins from the age of 14. And this is 14-year-old me in bed trying to get better grades at my exams from learning how to be more motivated, how to be more productive, how to be more efficient. And I think it was from listening with them at such a young age every single night that I don't really get limiting beliefs anymore. When I found out about, apart from this small hiccup, I didn't get them. I didn't understand where they were. And it was only until others started talking about that as a term, I was like, you mean people feel like they can't achieve something? You mean sometimes there's a voice in their head saying that they can't do it? I don't have role models, but I did really look up to, Tony and Brendan when I was young. Maybe it came from there.
And sometimes that voice is somebody else. Literally, it sounds like in your situation here related to the tennis business. Again, maybe they weren't saying you can't, maybe they were trying to protect you from failure, but I mean, it sounds like that's not the way you're wired, that you're going to go and try it and tap into that drive and that additional drive of someone else. Like they coming in, that mom wasn't somebody, she wasn't trying to push you aside. She wasn't one of the people saying you shouldn't be doing this. I'm guessing that was coincidence.
She was asking me maybe too many questions that at the time I didn't see were coming, but I really think, and I feel like I can say this now, and I feel like it became from jealousy because I was the only female in the team of, one of the biggest health clubs in the UK. I was earning the same amount as money as a lot of these professionals who were in the business 10, 20, 30 years. Just because, when I was young, I had a great rapport with kids. Of course, all the mums wanted to give me kids. And because of that, and because I came and I, was out earning them very quickly, you don't like that. You feel intimidated. You feel frustrated. So maybe, it did come from that and being the female and also the youngest by around 10 years within the team.
Yeah. So then how did things play out? I mean, you talk about coming back from your holiday and your travels and then coming back and really ramping up that business. Then how long did that keep going? Was it continuing to thrive and then COVID happened?
Yeah, we were doing incredibly. We had a monopoly on the UK market until COVID happened. And what happened at that time is there were no events because no one could go out. So I remember just being sat by my radiator crying in my apartment thinking, I just lost my business. And more than the financials, I had 40 members of staff. And being 24 years old with 40 team members who were reliant on an income was really, really hard. But in that moment, I didn't feel too bad. And I actually, to fast forward it quite quickly, I used my company contacts from the Apprentice and my media background, and I did a PR campaign. And that PR campaign drove a lot of traffic to a software company I had. We had 500,000 subscribers in 6 weeks. So I was able to take my team members and actually move them into the new company. And it's because of the success of that campaign, which is also how I ended up in PR, from driving results for me first and then helping others do the same.
Yeah. So would you say in this, you have a rival that you're driven to try to outdo or defeat here in the PR realm, or is it more driven back to kind of intrinsic drive, serving customers, things like that?
I think there's always an element in both. Without the intrinsic drive of really being able to help somebody, you won't be able to create it sustainably. But the reason why I started the PR company was the frustration fire, right? Because when I was on TV, going all to these red carpets, I would pay my PR agent $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 per month. And I wasn't getting any results. And I felt like that wasn't fair because I was putting all my money out, but what was I really getting back in return? And my fuel came from that. And therefore I thought, well, if I can guarantee where I'm going to get somebody, what steps are needed to get there, how is it possible, what do we need to avoid, and how long is it going to take, then I can actually really serve people. And that's how I actually got into another reason, apart from the success, of getting into the PR game as well.
And so, yeah, being born out of seeing this opportunity that you see through personal experience. This happens a lot with entrepreneurs, of seeing, being frustrated that I've got a problem that nobody has a solution for, or it sounds like in your case, being really frustrated with the solutions that you found anyway. So then there's that drive, do it better, reinvent it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard now to come up with a new idea. There are so many different people and entrepreneurs and ideas. A big part of that is how can you take something that's already proven there's demand for and make it better, and then also make it sustainable, and then obviously make it visible too.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about getting onto the Apprentice at such a young age. I mean, are you being an entrepreneur at that point? I want to ask a tennis question first, because I played through high school, I would say more recreationally than seriously competitively. I was on the high school team. I played doubles because I wasn't good enough to play singles. But, you think of, I want to ask you about mistakes when it comes to, let's say, playing tennis or coaching somebody else. Thinking through, let's say, a mistake in strategy versus mistakes in execution. Like, how do you think through those mistakes, like during a match, recognizing, okay, I might have the wrong strategy, it might be a mistake, adjusting in match or between sets. How did you think through some of that?
Especially when you get onto a court, and it's probably similar to other individual sports, you're the only person that you're reliant upon. You can't be reliant on your coach that was there before. You can't be reliant on the crowd, the referee, the opponent, the weather, all these external factors. It's all about being internal. And part of that is also being very honest with yourself. Now, a lot of the preparation to win a match obviously comes before, but playing a game, playing a set, and you've got to continuously adapt and try different strategies. Just like in business, not one strategy is going to work the same for every single match because of the opponent or the surface, whatever those conditions are. Potentially you're not feeling so good because you've got an injury. So what if, for example, your bank of 5, 10 really good strategies that you've practiced, and then trying them all out and figuring out, okay, which ones are going to be the best? And kind of like A/B testing when it comes to business, it's also testing different strategies and then bringing them down and then also mixing them up so the opponent can't tell what your strategy is every point as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the connection to entrepreneurship there, I think, is really interesting. It's the difference between knowing and testing. Right? I know this new way of doing PR is going to be a success. Well, you don't really know until you go and test. You either validate or, hey, I could be wrong, invalidate that strategy, whether it's Serena Williams on the other side of the net or a business challenge that you're facing.
No, exactly. And, what worked for one business isn't going to necessarily work for yours. So as a business owner, and I think this is also where I got a lot of my kind of skills as being an entrepreneur, is you have many different strategies. For example, there's so many different marketing strategies. Try them out. Which ones are going to be most effective for your current situations? And then having such a small ego to say, this didn't work, what else can I do? It's not that you failed. It's about you've eliminated one of those strategies in your box, in your toolbox.
You've learned and you move forward. That strategy wasn't a quote unquote mistake. But, we tried something, you learn, you adjust. That's part of what we talk about a lot here on the podcast. So it's good to hear lessons from the tennis court there. Well, one other tennis question I was going to ask, like there's this phrase, unforced errors, and that seems really judgmental. Like, again, like thinking of, somebody playing against Serena Williams at the top of her game, like anytime a player hits a shot wide or into the net, is that really fair? Like, who makes that judgment call of quote unquote unforced?
I really don't like the term, but the term unforced errors is basically something that you should have got right. So, for example, the serve in tennis is the only point, the only swing that you have complete control over.
Right.
So if you, for example, double faulting, that's completely on you. Now, do I like it? Not really so much, because there are so many external things. But if you look at tennis, you look at the tennis history, that's unfortunately the phrase they came up with.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Somebody makes this judgment. You should have been able to do that. That's kind of a guess. Like, you should have returned that cross-court forehand from Serena and like, hey, you try doing that. I couldn't do that.
And I think it comes to leadership as well, and how we are as a leader of our company, because we can't blame and have external blame to our team members. If something went wrong, human error is always going to go wrong in your business. And that's given you the ability to learn and to grow from it. Whereas actually, if you're saying you got that wrong, do it better, they're going to lose that confidence. And that's also potentially not the best leadership style too. So
you're not throwing that phrase around in business. Hey, unforced error. That press release was not clear. Unforced error. That wouldn't be helpful.
No, exactly.
So the Apprentice UK, I don't want to talk about the US version of the show, but I'm curious, like what was the appeal to you? Like, Alan Sugar, Lord Sugar, as the host and the business guru who's making these firing decisions. Like what was appealing about him? What are the things to learn from him specifically?
So Lord Sugar, he's also into tennis, actually. He has a place in Boca. And growing up, I was obsessed. I watched every single episode from the age of 9 till the age of applying. And I knew for a fact, I was going to get onto the show because of the amount of prep work that I did. And Lord Sugar, I think it's not so much about looking up to him. And I think he is an incredible business person, but for me, it was the challenge of being thrown into a different situation and being able to adapt and to be able to change. And I haven't watched the Trump version too much, but Lord Sugar, even though he comes across as quite an interesting character on the show, he's really, really, really lovely and someone that I look up to.
Yeah. So when you got fired, what led to that? Was it a matter of something you might describe as a mistake or just another team outperforming you?
This is actually something else I could call one of my favorite mistakes. I got fired because my business already was kind of a market cap. I couldn't expand anymore because I was already the biggest. So looking back then, I think there's two different things I would have done differently. However, there's also the other side of things. Firstly, I became the market leader. When you become the market leader and you gain the market share, that also means there's a market cap. So the market that I chose to go into wasn't big enough for me to achieve 7 and 8 figure goals. I had multiple 6-figure business, but it was never going to be a multiple 7. So something I learned there is really analyzing the market you're going in to actually make sure the market fits where your potential goal is. Now, a second part of that, which is potentially how I could have won the Apprentice, and I'm glad I didn't on that note, but I could have thought, how else can I scale it out? I had a really big email list. I had tens of thousands of tennis players who were regularly competing to tennis. So maybe I could have created an e-commerce tennis platform. Maybe I could create something around what I was already doing. And that I've taken into my new companies, making sure that, there isn't a market cap. So when you work so hard, there isn't that ceiling. And how can you think of different pathways and not being scared to do different pathways too?
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think of, there was a diagram I saw the other day that was, kind of talking about career decisions or entrepreneurship decisions. I'm 48 years old going on 49. So I'm in this part of the diagram where a lot of my life's path has already been what it is, but I still have many decision points about where I take the rest of that career. You at age 20, almost 27, have many more decision points ahead of you. There are different things you could be doing. So back to the question, this is the question I wanted to ask. Starting a PR firm, there was that immediate experience that you went through, dissatisfaction with the PR firm. How do you decide of different companies you could start that, okay, there's the one that you're going to dive into? Was that a clear decision, or did you think about different possibilities?
For the PR company, I guess it was a mixture of both. One, because I had success in actually, I think there's a big, to take a step back, you should never start a business in something you haven't got experience in, because there are so many different lessons that you need to learn, the failures that you need to fail at in order to be very good at what you need to do. So before that, the experience I gained was, end up doing my own PR and having 500,000 subscribers in 6 weeks, purely from a PR campaign. So I'd proven to myself that I could get real results that really helped a business. And then also being on the fame side of it, the red carpet events, the film premieres, TV, radio, and all the media training. So a big part of that is, what have you got genuine experience that you can really help where there is a gap in the market that you can then go into? And it's not so much always about following your passion. Yes, my first business was a passion business, but for a lot of it, I didn't want to play tennis because I was full out to business with tennis. So sometimes it's about looking at what your real skill sets are and starting. And if you haven't got them, go and get them first.
Well, and I think at a younger age, you have more room to recover from a quote unquote mistake career-wise. So that's an advantage, and maybe that allows a little bit more risk taking. I mean, it might just being an old guy now romanticizing youth.
No, 100%. I've got, fortunately, a very entrepreneurial partner. I haven't got kids. I sold everything and decided to travel the world. So apart from my company overheads, which I'm in control with, I haven't really got too many headaches. I've been able to eliminate them. So my risk tolerance is high, because I also know that I could lose everything overnight and I'd be able to be successful because I have the experience, the mindset, the skills, the connections. So I think, I can take bigger risks while I can. And when I have kids, that is going to be a different story, but I'm also okay with having less risk when I'm there as well.
I mean, you seem keenly aware of these lessons of mistakes are going to happen. People make mistakes. Let's learn from it. Let's not blame people. I mean, that's great. Did you have any of that, like going back to being 14 years old and starting the candy business? Did you have a sense of, I'm making mistakes, but it's okay because the business is new, I can learn, I can adjust? Was that part of that early experience as you can remember it?
I've always made mistakes, and there's times that I have been in denial. The reason why I think I have such a good perspective is because denial didn't get me anywhere. Telling everyone everything was okay and with the team and with the company didn't get me anywhere. So I definitely was never, as perspective as I am now. And in 10 years' time, it will probably be even more so. But it had to be, going through me probably being a bad leader, me probably being not the best at my admin, me probably not quitting when I should have quit. That has allowed me to learn because of the consequences, and then being able to actually work on them myself so that I can be a better leader. I can know when to quit and when to continue.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, Sabrina, we're joined again, Sabrina Stocker, 2 PR. Mistakes, I'm curious, mistakes related to social media or PR. There's debate when it comes to, let's say, social media, authenticity, being real, this kind of veneer or persona. I mean, like, what have you learned, or are there mistakes that people make if they're trying to gain a following, let's say, in social media?
If there wasn't such a need for social media now, I probably wouldn't be on it. Because I think it is a big part of our life now that we didn't sign up for. It just happened. And now not being on there's consequences for that as well. Some of the biggest mistakes I found is trying to do so much and then stop because they're not getting results. Trying to push themselves out there, but they're pushing themselves out there as a character or somebody that they want to be seen as rather than who they are. A big one, I think, out there that's starting to trend out of there is the fake success, which is the Lamborghinis, the private jets, when they're filming in a private jet and it hasn't even taken off, when you've got girls standing in front of designer stores that they just decided to stand in front of. There's a lot of fakeness out there. And all you're doing is seeking approval from other people on a social level, because I could not post anything, but I'm very, very good at what I do. So I know people will come to me. I don't need to show off a lavish lifestyle to show that I'm successful. And I think, especially in the younger generation, in the early 20s, early 30s, because social media is used for dating, maybe that's why. Maybe there's the element of trying to fit in. But really, if we come back grounded, then we don't need to do all of these things. And it takes a lot of social pressure as well.
Yeah. There's an expression that gets used a lot in Silicon Valley. This idea of fake it till you make it. It's interesting you bring up the idea of somebody faking this appearance of wealth. Faking it doesn't mean you're going to make it. I mean, I think there's this assumption in entrepreneurship. Well, we're going to fake it to get us to a point where we are actually making it. If you have somebody coming to you, do you have to sometimes counsel them about not faking it in terms of not overstating business success, like, things that are about the appearance of the business, if you will, not the appearance of the person?
I've turned away probably hundreds of business owners because I'm like, you've got to get the results before you put yourself out there, and fake it till you make it doesn't work anymore. People can see through it. It's genuine success and the lessons that you learn, the way that you talk, the way that you frame things, that will show that you're on the same level as somebody else. And you can tell those very quickly. And especially when it comes to the media, there's a big backfire if you put out false information, and it will really damage your brand. So a lot of the time, I know other companies who say, yes, I'm going to put you in the media because they want to take the revenue. But what are you serving? You're serving your bank. You're not serving the client. So rather than investing into an image, invest into actually being better at business first.
Wow. I imagine there's a lot of mistakes. Clients have mistaken expectations, or they make the mistake of thinking of like, hey, Sabrina, make me go viral. Like, you just flip a switch. I mean, you've had some experience with some things that go viral, but do people sometimes think it's easier than it really is?
The interesting part is when you want to become known, go viral, become famous, you've got to have a freaking amazing product or service. Like, our service that went viral on the software was getting food onto people's tables during lockdown.
Wow.
So when you're really thinking about going viral, getting fame, using the power of press, you've got to have a really, really good product or service. Then you've got to have the right timing, meaning it's relevant in the media. And then you've got to have the credibility and results to back it up as well. Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't want to be in a situation of making a pitch that the client couldn't back up. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that you're authentically because then I guess that would go back to your reputation and 2 PR's reputation. If you told some media outlet, here's somebody, let's say they've created a fake story in a way, and you don't want to be passing that along and have that be uncovered, because then who's going to take another guest or interview subject from you, right?
Yeah, it's really important actually for business owners. Like, putting out false information goes back to the client. We have all the information that the client has given us. They say as a disclaimer, this information is true. So then if they're putting financial information out, there's a chance that the publication will be like, can we see the financial records before we put it to publish? And having that transparency, you've got to do your due diligence as a PR agency as well. So it's really about having your client being honest, but also you doing your research.
And hopefully that's a rediscovery of, that sounds like a very old-fashioned, solid value of, integrity. Mm-hmm. Imagine that. Thank you to the younger generations are discovering integrity, and you can teach a thing to some of the entrepreneurs who haven't demonstrated that integrity. Many examples. I think Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. She thought she could fake it till she made it, and that was a great story. But I'm sure she had great PR people. She got a lot of coverage, but that couldn't paper over the reality that was there. Not to pick on her, but that's one example that comes to mind.
No, and it's really important. Integrity is so important. And imagine what your team members will think of you if you're putting false numbers out there. They know the numbers, they know the sales coming in. So it's also from that leadership perspective as well. Yeah.
Well, one other question I wanted to ask you, as a podcast host, I get pitched a lot. There's one thing that publicists or PR firms will do. They'll say, so-and-so's got a new book coming out, and they would be a great guest. Don't you want them to be on your show? And sometimes it gets to be a bit too much, where I can't even reply, I'm sorry, but no thank you, or whatever. So then there's and I think they're automated, like the incessant automated follow-up emails that to me as the receiver, I think it's a bit of a mistake of, like, the more someone irritates me with that third or that fourth email, I may really unsubscribe or block sender. They could be pushing too hard in a counterproductive way. But before asking you the generalized question, because of your last name, and we talked before the show, Sabrina Stocker or Stocker, or depending on the accent, right? It might sound like Stalker, Stalker. Here's a PR follow-up email that I got. I want to get your honest reaction to this, Sabrina. So it said, I hope this was a follow-up email. So I could tell it was RE, and there was the history down there. It said, quote, I hope I'm not coming across as a stalker, but I just wanted to know if you saw my last email. I thought, that seemed like kind of a mistake. Like that's not real. I don't know, that language. That could really bother somebody.
It could. I think, again, human error. Sometimes maybe it was a VA sending it out and they have a different understanding of the name. Maybe it was an inexperienced team member. So I get a whole load of these because I'm a contributor, entrepreneur, for people pitching to come in, and there are follow-ups, and it sounds like a template that they've probably taken from a YouTube video of like a fun new way to say it. So I've received so many good pitches and so many bad pitches and follow-up emails, but I really take them with a pinch of salt now because I've gone through so many, and I'm like, it's probably not really the person. It's probably a mistake or a VA, or not really understanding the wording. So for me, because I've received so many bad and good follow-up emails, I bring it down to human error.
Well, that's very gracious of you. That's a good reminder for me to step back and show a little grace. But I tried to do it in a polite way. I sent a reply saying, well, it's not that it's bothered me personally, but I don't know, using that word, like, really, that could really bother somebody else. I tried to give a little bit of a gentle feedback loop, Never got a reply back. And then a couple of months later, it was the same follow-up with the same language. I'm like, this seems very, very automated. I'm not going to try replying to a piece of software that's not going to read my reply. But I think it was, to me, at least from my judgment, sorry for being judgmental on it, I think it's an unforced error on their part to use a word that could be upsetting.
I think that there we go. Now we have an unforced error that we should tell the team.
But I think, as you were talking about, we always talk about here on the podcast, there's got to be some feedback loops where if you've made a mistake, discover that so you can adjust. Or he could stop sending, his adjustment could be stop using that word or stop sending it to me. Or he could say, Mark has no sense of humor, so forget it. I mean, there's different ways of viewing this.
Yeah. And I think actually, within our team and also externally, we should point it out. Like pointing it out and seeing if they change anything. Maybe it's automated. Maybe they could go in and change the automation, whatever that is. Feedback between business owners is really important. And sometimes we're too scared to do it because we don't want to offend somebody, but maybe we see the need to do it.
Yeah. So I'm being negative there, and let's turn it back to a positive. I get good pitches too. What to you is an example of a good pitch when you receive one? You're like, oh, that hits the mark.
So in general, for me, it's about when it's going to actually help the other person.
Uh-huh.
So say that I wanted to get one of my clients onto a podcast. It's not about their book coming out. It's not about their new podcast launching. It's about, have I, or my team have they actually researched the show, meaning that it's a good match? Has my client got the same or nearish level of credibility as a podcaster? Because it's a two-way thing. And is it going to add value to the podcaster itself? And flipping the script and saying, well, if I was in the podcaster's shoes, what would I care about? I'd want to care about this person's audience. And if they're going to share on social media with me, I want to care about the reliability because I want to make sure that my calendar is, looked after as well. I want to care that they're going to add value to my audience so that I really enjoy speaking to them as well. And just thinking about the other person rather than being selfish and thinking about you. And most companies don't do it because it's harder, because it takes more work, because it's not as easy, because a VA is automating it. But really, if you want to get on good shows, you've got to put in some effort as well.
Mm-hmm. So great thoughts from entrepreneurship around customer focus, customer empathy. To me, the best pitches are one where I can tell it's not just a mass email with my name and the name of my podcast inserted, where somebody would say, we've checked out your podcast. And then you can tell when that's authentic or not, I think also. But when they say, well, we love the theme of your podcast, and here's a guest who has learned a lot from mistakes and would love to share their story, and they have a book to promote. I'm like, okay, great. That's a really good pitch that will get my attention and builds a connection instead of like, oh, here's someone else with another book to pitch.
Mm-hmm. No, and you can even take it to the next level. And something we do, for example, is we'll actually get the client to make a video. So we send them a video of them actually speaking. So you can see what they're like on camera. Mm-hmm. You can see if they have the right tonality, the way they're presenting themselves. You can see if there's somebody who'd be a good fit from their show, not from the email of the PR agency, but actually of the person showing them straight away. Yeah,
that's very cool. That's a really good tip. So it's been really fun here today, Sabrina Stocker, 2PR, 2PR.io. Where are clients that you work with normally based, or are there certain types of businesses that you work with? What's the profile of who's a good fit with you and your firm?
For sure. Well, for me, and you can probably tell from this podcast, somebody who's really been able to have already done it, have already proven it, and been successful in their particular field. They want to accelerate how quickly they're being picked up by big media placements. And also, mainly most of our clients are in the US as well, just because we look after a lot of US publications and have relationships there.
Okay. Well, I hope people will come check out your website. Again, 2PR.io. Check out Be the Authority, YouTube show and a podcast. And Sabrina, thank you again. First off, reaching out to me to invite me to be on your show. I hope, the word authority, I hope I could live up to that in some way. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have you here talking about your favorite mistake.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. It was really, really fun today.